go. Oh, nice.
Oh, damn. I thought he was gone.
That's early.
The horrifying truth is, in some parts of Asia, pythons are raised in brutal factories where they're skinned alive for their prized hides. This isn't some rare niche practice. It's a thriving industry, and they're not alone.
For nearly 3 years, Evelyn LeMadrid has been investigating a shark fin trafficking operation. Now, she's putting together the team that's going to raid it.
El éxito de este operativo va a ser si todas las entidades trabajamos juntos.
From sharks being slaughtered just for their fins, to silkworms boiled for silk. There's a lot more to the products we consume and wear than meets the eye. Have you ever stopped to consider the hidden stories behind the things you buy? 1. The dark side of Vietnam's python skin industry. Vietnam has pretty much cornered the market on python skin. Farms all over the country, particularly in the Mekong Delta, breed and process pythons solely for their highly coveted skins. Fashion houses love it, and so do the people who buy their products. But behind the high fashion facade, things can get pretty grim. Now let's get real for a second. These pythons are subjected to a process that's not just cruel, it's downright medieval. To prepare the skin for sale, these snakes are subjected to a brutal practice that involves inflating them like balloons. Yes, you heard that right. Inflating them. Workers place rubber bands around the snake's mouths and anuses and then slowly pump air, or sometimes water, into these animals until their bodies grotesquely expand, stretching their skin to maximize the surface area for processing. The reasoning behind this horrifying practice? It's all about preserving the quality of the skin, ensuring that it looks pristine and attractive when it hits the market. But that's not even the worst part. Many of these pythons are still alive while this happens. Instead of being humanely euthanized, they're often improperly stunned or not stunned at all. Workers may use whatever makeshift tools they can find. Some even resort to car batteries to deliver a jolt of electricity. This stunning is not only ineffective, it leaves the snakes fully conscious, aware of the excruciating pain they are enduring as their bodies bloat beyond capacity. Imagine being trapped in your own skin, feeling the pressure build and the sharp pain of your insides stretching uncomfortably. Some snakes even exhibit signs of panic, thrashing helplessly as they are inflated, struggling against the inevitable. And it doesn't end there. Before meeting this cruel fate, these snakes are kept in filthy, cramped cages. Forget moving around or getting comfortable. These conditions are just torturous. The air is thick with disease, but the health of the snakes is the least of anyone's concerns. What really matters here is their skin. Even if the animals are suffering from infections or untreated wounds, as long as the skin looks good, the farmers aren't bothered. It's all about the end product. Health be damned. But let's not kid ourselves. It's not just the skins that are being harvested. Every part of these snakes is used up. While the skins might be the star of the show, the meat from these pythons is a pretty big deal in Vietnam, where it finds its way onto local menus. Python meat might not be your go-to dinner choice elsewhere, but in this part of the world, it's considered a delicacy. But it's not just the snakes who are paying the price here. Think about the workers dealing with all this. Blood and guts from the snakes don't just disappear. They drain into ponds where fish are raised for food. Disgusting, right? But it's also pretty dangerous. This setup is basically a breeding ground for diseases, and we all know how quickly health crises can spiral out of control. The close contact between humans and animals in these unsanitary conditions, that's a recipe for disaster. Like and subscribe right now, and you'll have amazing luck for the rest of the week. 2. The billion-dollar crocodile industry. Crocodile farming is a billion-dollar industry that's been making waves, mostly for the wrong reasons. These reptiles are at the center of a profitable venture that spans across Vietnam, China, and Malaysia. It's not just about the meat, it's the skin that's the real gold mine here, turning these scaly creatures into luxury handbags and high-end fashion items. But before you rush to admire that chic crocodile bag, let's peel back the layers of this industry and see what's really going on. In certain cultures, crocodile meat is considered a lean delicacy, packed with nutrients. In China, it's touted as beneficial for conditions like asthma, rheumatism, and even tumors, based on ancient documents that claim it can help with respiratory and digestive issues. But that's just scratching the surface. The profits for individual farms can soar to tens of millions of dollars, and you have to wonder, is this really worth the cost? When we think of farming, we imagine idyllic pastures, right? Well, not so much in the world of crocodile farming. In places like China, these poor animals are often zip-tied in awkward positions, making it painfully clear that comfort isn't on the agenda. They're tossed into wheelbarrows while still alive. Imagine being thrown around like a piece of cargo while you're struggling to move. And then we have Vietnam, where crocodile farming is all about the skin, literally. These facilities resemble clinical slaughterhouses more than farms, where crocodiles are held down, metal rods shoved into their spines while they're still squirming. This happens while the animals are very much alive and in distress. It's enough to make anyone question the ethics of this industry. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that around 30,000 crocodile skins are exported each year from Vietnam alone. All for what? A flashy handbag that makes you feel fabulous? Let's paint a picture of life for these crocodiles. They're kept in filthy enclosures that are often smaller than their own bodies, or even confined for up to 15 months in overcrowded concrete pits. It's a cramped, overstimulating nightmare for these creatures that naturally roam vast distances. With limited space to move, they live in squalor, struggling in conditions that would make anyone falter. Can you really call it farming when the animals are treated like this? While the meat industry might claim to promote health, the reality is grim. The treatment of these crocodiles raises serious ethical questions. The reality is, these animals endure immense suffering for a chance at becoming a dinner plate or a fashionable accessory. The profits might be sky high, but the cruelty involved is staggering. Do we really want to support an industry that sacrifices the well-being of sentient beings for luxury items and gourmet dishes? It's a sobering thought, especially when you consider the actual lives behind those glossy skins. 3. The production of horse meat. Horse meat. We know, it sounds super controversial, right? For many, the idea of eating a horse is just a big no-no. These are the beautiful, majestic creatures we see galloping through fields. But in places like France and Italy, horse meat is actually a delicacy, served up in fancy restaurants like it's the hottest trend. So, what gives? How do we reconcile this culinary experience with the not-so-pretty practices behind horse slaughter? In Russia, for instance, a horse farm is said to process around 20 horses a day. That's a lot of horses being sent to slaughter. And let's get real for a second. The conditions leading up to this moment can be heartbreaking. Many of these horses are crammed into tiny, filthy spaces for long journeys, stressed out and anxious before they even reach the slaughterhouse. Now, when they get to the slaughterhouse, things get even darker. One of the most shocking practices is that hooves are often cut off separately during butchering. And guess what? Those hooves don't just go to waste. They're turned into stuff like gelatin, glue, and even animal feed. Seriously, can we justify eating horse meat when it comes with such a heavy cost? Of course, there are people who defend the horse meat industry. They argue that horses can be raised humanely and that horse meat is a lean source of protein, which is way lower in fat compared to beef. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a ton of pushback from animal rights activists who are all about advocating for better treatment of these animals and finding more humane alternatives. 4. The bamboo rat farm. While most people wouldn't even think of them as a meal, in Vietnam, bamboo rats have become a sought-after delicacy, so much so that their meat is reportedly pricier than even Wagyu beef. But before you start raising an eyebrow, let's dig into the intriguing world of bamboo rat farming, particularly in Yên province, where one of the largest farms operates. This place has been raising these creatures for a while now, and they don't just stop at rats, they're farming porcupines too. For over a decade, this farm has been all about raising bamboo rats and porcupines. The rats are primarily fed bamboo and sugarcane, and the farm even cuts and preps the bamboo to keep their prized rodents well fed. Talk about farm to table, right? Now, when it comes to cooking these bamboo rats, things get a bit controversial. Word on the street is that they're often flavored to taste like dog meat. For a lot of people, that's a big red flag, especially given the debate around consuming animals that are traditionally seen as pets in other cultures. Despite being banned in places like China and technically illegal in other countries too, bamboo rat meat is still wildly popular. You could say it's an underground delicacy of sorts. So, why the ban? Well, bamboo rats were pulled from menus when people started linking them to health concerns, especially with their potential to carry diseases. But even with the ban in place, people are still willing to pay a premium for that rat meat. In some circles, it's seen as a luxurious, rare treat, making it all the more appealing despite the risks involved. While the farm in Yên province is one of the biggest, it's definitely not alone. There's still a huge demand for bamboo rats across Southeast Asia, and as long as that demand exists, you can bet there'll be places willing to supply it. Whether you're into the idea or find it a bit too out there, it's fascinating how these lesser-known food sources continue to thrive, even in the face of legal crackdowns. It just goes to show that when something is this prized, it's hard to keep it off the menu entirely. 5. The unlikely world of rat farming in Australia. In a surprising twist on traditional farming, Cheryl Martin has swapped her dairy farming days for something a little quirkier, a rat farm. About an hour east of Adelaide, this former dairy farmer, fruit grower, and hardware store worker decided to embrace the quirky and unconventional world of rodent farming. It started 8 years ago, when she saw an opportunity to work from home while doing something a little offbeat. Initially, Cheryl had her doubts about her new venture, thinking she might have made a mistake. The smell was overwhelming at first, but once she got things cleaned up, she realized she could actually grow to enjoy her furry little charges. As time passed, she learned to handle them without fear, discovering that most were surprisingly tame, with only a few that were a bit feistier. So why the rat farm? Well, there's a big demand for rats as food for pet reptiles. And we're not just talking about a handful of sizes. Cheryl produces a variety of options to suit the dietary needs of different snakes. From tiny pinkies just a day old to hefty jumbo rats weighing around 400 grams, there's a rat for every reptile appetite. The breeding process is efficient, with rats capable of having up to 18 pups every 23 to 26 days, which is a significant advantage in a business where time is money. But the job isn't all cute and cuddly. Cheryl mentions that one of the hardest parts is processing the rats, which involves gassing them with food-grade carbon dioxide. To prepare them for their new purpose, she uses food-grade carbon dioxide, which can be a tough aspect of the job for her emotionally. She tries her best to make the process as humane as possible, showing respect for the animals she raises. Interestingly, this type of farming has become even more lucrative during the COVID-19 pandemic. With pet reptile sales soaring, Cheryl found herself processing more rats to meet the increased demand, a situation that both stressed her out and boosted her profits significantly. Despite its quirks, Cheryl's rat farming operation serves a purpose in the ecosystem of pet ownership. While most people might cringe at the thought of raising rats, she's carved out a niche that is essential for many reptile enthusiasts. As she looks toward retirement, she appreciates the sustainability and flexibility that come with this unusual farming choice, proving that even the most unconventional ventures can be surprisingly rewarding. 6. The croaking controversy of Asia's meat market. When you think about adventurous eating, frog legs might just jump to the front of your mind. In Asia, frog farming has turned into quite the industry, raking in around $40 million in international trade each year. Countries like France, Belgium, and the United States are gobbling up this delicacy, while Indonesia, China, Thailand, and Vietnam are leading the charge in exporting these little critters. But let's dig a little deeper into what goes on behind the scenes in this bustling trade. The practices surrounding frog farming are pretty grim, to say the least. Frogs are often scooped up from their natural habitats and tossed into overcrowded sacks. Imagine being crammed into a bag with no room to breathe for 2 days. It's a nightmare. Many of these frogs suffocate in their sacks, while others arrive at farms barely clinging to life. Once at the farms, things don't get any better. Workers are seen sorting through live frogs and dead ones, often slamming them against the floor to dispatch them. It's harsh, and honestly, it feels like a scene from a horror movie rather than a food production facility. What's worse, the methods used for preparing these frogs for the dinner plate. Workers frequently make cuts behind the heads of the frogs while they're still alive. If they slice behind the ear instead of in front, these poor creatures can survive for at least an hour, left in agony as their bodies are mutilated. Talk about a gruesome process. This isn't just about cruel practices, it raises some serious ethical concerns. Frogs are often skinned while still conscious, which might make you wonder, how did we even get here? Overcrowding in tanks leads to stress and sickness, and with minimal regulation, the welfare of these animals is usually overlooked in the name of profit. And let's not forget about the environmental impact. The rampant capture of frogs from their natural habitats to meet international market demands can seriously decline local ecosystems. Frogs play critical roles in their environments, and losing them can throw the entire food chain off balance. 7. Shark fin soup's costly impact. Shark fin soup has long been considered a delicacy in certain cultures, but it's also a major factor in the downfall of shark populations worldwide. The demand for this pricey dish has turned sharks into victims of an unimaginable practice. Did you know that one shark fin can cost hundreds of dollars? This dried seafood is more valuable than you might think, and that's where the trouble begins. To meet the demand, fishermen resort to some pretty brutal methods. They pull up a shark from the ocean, and instead of catching it for consumption like you might think, they stab it to render it helpless. Once subdued, they cut off its fins and toss the rest of its body back into the water, often leaving it to suffocate or bleed out. It's estimated that around 73 million sharks are butchered each year just for their fins. Can you believe that? Sharks are apex predators, crucial for maintaining the balance of marine ecosystems. They help regulate the populations of other fish and maintain the health of coral reefs. But as their numbers dwindle, we're starting to see the consequences. A decrease in shark populations can lead to overpopulation of other species, which can disrupt the entire marine ecosystem. The demand for shark fin soup isn't just a passing trend. It's often served at weddings and special occasions, seen as a status symbol in some cultures. The irony is that while many enjoy the soup for its supposed taste and prestige, they may not realize that it's contributing to a massive environmental crisis. In response to the alarming decline in shark populations, several countries have started implementing bans on shark finning and the sale of shark fins. However, enforcement is tricky, especially in places where cultural practices hold strong sway. Additionally, the black market for shark fins thrives, making it even harder to curb this cruel industry. The good news? Awareness is growing. Conservation organizations are tirelessly working to educate the public about the impact of shark finning. They're advocating for sustainable seafood choices, pushing for alternative dishes that don't involve the slaughter of these magnificent creatures. It's a challenge, but consumer choices can drive change. 8. Rabbit farming in the Philippines. Rabbit farming is becoming a popular choice for small farmers in the Philippines, mainly for producing rabbit meat, which is considered a healthier, leaner alternative to pork or chicken. It's gaining traction as a sustainable source of protein, especially with the growing demand for healthier and eco-friendly meat options. There are two main systems used in rabbit farming: the deep litter system and the cage system. In the deep litter system, rabbits are raised on the ground, usually with bedding materials like straw or wood shavings. It's seen as a more natural way of raising rabbits, giving them space to move and dig around. On the flip side, the cage system is more common for commercial farms. Rabbits are kept in individual cages, making it easier to monitor their health, manage breeding, and prevent disease spread. While effective, the cage system often raises concerns about animal welfare. Keeping animals in confined spaces for long periods can lead to stress or poor health if not properly managed. Despite the benefits of rabbit farming, like low startup costs and high reproduction rates, there are concerns about the ethical treatment of these animals, especially in meat production. Some argue that certain farming practices can lead to neglect or mistreatment. Proper care, humane handling, and slaughtering methods are crucial to ensuring that rabbit farming can be done in an ethical and sustainable way. Rabbit meat production can be profitable, but it's essential for farmers to maintain a balance between profit and compassion, ensuring the welfare of the animals they raise for food. 9. Donkey farming for hides and meat. Donkey farming has surged in parts of Asia, especially in China, where there's high demand for donkey hides to produce yijiao, a traditional gelatin used in beauty products and medicine. This rise in demand has led to mass donkey farming, not just for hides, but also for their meat. What's shocking is that many people don't even realize they're eating donkey meat, as it's often sold under the guise of beef or other meats in some regions. The lack of transparency in labeling has raised serious concerns about consumer rights and food safety. The farming process itself can be horrifying. Donkeys, known for their gentle nature, are often crammed into overcrowded, filthy conditions where they're deprived of basic care, food, and water. Many suffer from untreated injuries or diseases, with little to no veterinary care provided. In the quest for profit, These animals are subjected to intense stress, neglect, and abuse. The slaughter process is especially inhumane. Many donkeys are blindfolded before being bludgeoned. The blindfolds are meant to keep them calm before being struck, as they're less likely to resist or panic when they can't see what's coming. But this practice doesn't make the process any less brutal or painful. Reports have surfaced of donkeys being transported for long hours or even days without food or water, only to be slaughtered in conditions that cause them immense suffering. 10. The price of luxury silk. We don't really think of insects feeling pain the same way we do, right? But when it comes to silkworm farming, the reality is a lot harsher than most people realize. In places like Nam Cao, Vietnam, silkworm farming is a huge part of the local economy, with silk being woven into luxurious fabrics that can sell for as much as $150 per dress. The silk is beautiful, elegant, and highly coveted. But what we don't often talk about is the cost, both in terms of labor and the lives of these tiny creatures. Silkworms are incredibly difficult to raise. These little guys are always hungry and need to be fed mulberry leaves constantly. If they don't get enough food at the right times, they die. Farmers have to work around the clock to ensure their silkworms are well fed and kept in optimal conditions. Even the slightest slip in care can mean massive losses for the farmers. Now let's get real about the darker side. To harvest the silk, most of the worms are boiled alive inside their cocoons to unravel the fibers. This process is necessary to keep the silk intact, but it's pretty terrifying when you think about it. The worms are raised for weeks, only to meet a painful and abrupt end, just as they're about to transform into moths. Imagine living your whole life, working hard, only to be cut down before you get to fly. It's not the warm and fuzzy feeling we usually associate with silk, right? The silk industry is massive, and there's no doubt that these delicate fabrics bring jobs and income to villages like Nam Cao. But there's also an ethical debate around it. While some silk farms are exploring more humane ways to harvest silk, like waiting for the moths to emerge before using the empty cocoons, this practice is still far from the norm. The demand for silk is just too high, and the traditional methods remain in place, leaving these little insects paying the price. So, next time you slip into that luxurious silk dress or enjoy an exotic dish, will you think twice about the journey it took to get to you?